October 6th is, among other things, the anniversary of the outbreak of the Yom Kippur War, known in the Arab countries as the Ramadan War, a conflict that tells you virtually all that you need to know about the modern Middle East. Starting with the fact that it was launched on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. To Israel's neighbors, this isn't a moment to show a little respect, as Western powers will often say, well, perhaps we shouldn't bomb if we're engaged in conflict in an Arab country during Ramadan. It's, yahoo, let's catch them when they're at the synagogue and slaughter them all before they can fight back. The Arabs aren't shy about calling it the Ramadan War. Why should we be shy about military operations during Ramadan? It was also an attempt by the Arabs to get back some prestige as well as killing all the Jews because of the fact that they had lost. In 1948, they tried to exterminate Israel as soon as it was created by UN resolution and suffered an ignominious defeat at the hands of vastly outnumbered and outgunned opponents. Then in 1967, they'd just been ready. We're going to get the Jews this time. We're going to kill them all. We're coming for you. And the Israelis launched a preemptive attack, which the Egyptians and Syrians apparently didn't expect just because they'd threatened to wipe out Israel and order the UN peacekeepers out of the way, and in the Six-Day War that obviously humiliated the Arabs badly. So the surprise attack went pretty well in October of 1973 for the first few days. But then the Egyptians were fought to a standstill, the Syrians were repulsed, the Israelis went on the offensive in Syria and badly humiliated the Syrians, which caused the Egyptians to panic. They thought, well, we better resume offensive operations, so they did, but of course they got soundly thrashed. The Israelis drove into the Sinai, into Ariel Sharon. And then there was a ceasefire, and the Arabs, oh, we don't want a ceasefire, we want to continue fighting. Things went from bad to worse, and eventually they were defeated, though there was almost a Soviet-American confrontation that could have escalated to shooting before the whole thing was settled. And then you look at the military effort. It wasn't just Syria and Egypt. A bunch of other Arab countries were involved. There were troops from Algeria, from Saudi Arabia, our buddies. They showed up without any logistical plans. There were some from Iraq and other places. There were also Cuban troops involved, thousands of them. There were some Soviet forces were certainly up on the front lines. Some were killed, some seemed to have been captured. There were even North Koreans. The incredible band of knaves on the side of the Arabs. And both the Egyptians and the Syrians committed atrocities. The Syrian defense minister later said he'd personally given a medal to a Syrian soldier who'd killed prisoners with an axe and eaten some of their flesh. Yeah, that makes you feel good, doesn't it? That's how you want to remember a war. And the weird thing is, in both Syria and Egypt, the war is treated as a victory. We got them back for the Six-Day War because we won the first little bit when we caught them by surprise. Sure, we lost eventually, but we're calling this a victory. There are memorials to it in both countries designed by North Korean artists. Yeah, you're doing great. And afterward, of course, it was the Israelis who, once again, having beaten their enemies, more or less sued for peace. The Egyptians finally decided they couldn't stand another defeat like that, so they agreed to make a very chilly peace with Israel, but none of their other neighbors have, even though they must understand by now, at least in their calmer moments, that Israel has nuclear weapons, and the consequence of defeating Israel in a conventional war would be the annihilation of their own military forces and much else besides. And that's the last point to bear in mind. Because Israel's a very small country. People act as though it were Goliath and its neighbors were David, but the reverse is true. You look at a map of the Middle East, you can barely find Israel. If you take out the West Bank, Israel is about as wide at its narrowest as, if you're Canadian, say Ottawa, from the 416 to Parliament Hill, certainly narrower than Toronto. That's the entire strategic reserve. And yet to this day, and this is the final classic thing, even looking at all this history, and looking at the geography, and looking at the fact that Israel is a democracy that respects the rights of all its citizens, including its Muslim citizens, whereas its neighbors don't respect anybody's rights, people still try to blame Israel for everything. It's not just a misunderstanding. It's something far more malevolent. If you can look at the Yom Kippur War and not tell who the good guys are in the Middle East, then you are intentionally placing yourself beyond the reach of reason. So that's why we need to remember the Yom Kippur War, because it tells us what's at stake in the Middle East, who the combatants are, and what it means not to be on the side of Israel. If you are enjoying these commentaries, please visit my website. That's johnrobson.ca. It helps support my documentaries, my writing, my commentary. And keep watching The Rebel. If you're not already a subscriber, please do subscribe.